Nobody is coming. No message. No rescue. No moment where everything suddenly makes sense. And if that sentence makes you uncomfortable, it's because a part of you is still waiting. You don't like to admit it, but somewhere inside you there's a quiet expectation, a belief that one day something will change without you having to become someone else. A break, a sign, a push, a person, a moment, something. You keep telling yourself you're being patient, but patience has nothing to do with it. What you're really doing is waiting to be spared. Spared from discomfort, spared from sacrifice, spared from responsibility. You call it timing. You call it healing. You call it figuring things out. But underneath all those respectable words, there's one truth you refuse to face. You're waiting because acting would hurt, and you've built your entire identity around avoiding pain. Nobody talks about this part. The part where you don't feel lazy, you feel tired. The part where you don't feel weak, you feel overwhelmed. The part where you don't feel lost, you feel numb. So you sit there, scrolling, consuming, thinking, convincing yourself that awareness is progress. It's not. Awareness without action is just another form of comfort. And comfort is the one thing that has been slowly eroding you from the inside. You wake up, do what you have to do, distract yourself just enough, and go back to sleep. Days pass, weeks pass, years pass, and you keep telling yourself, I'll start when I feel ready, when I have more clarity, when things calm down, when life gives me space. But life never gives space. Life takes space. And the longer you wait, the more it takes from you. Here's the part you don't want to hear. No one is coming to give you permission to become disciplined. No one is coming to validate your struggle. No one is coming to notice how hard it's been for you. No one is coming to save you from the consequences of your own avoidance. And deep down, you already know that. That's why this hurts. You've been hoping someone would understand you enough to make it easier. That someone would see your potential and unlock it for you. That someone would show up and finally say, now, this is your moment. But that moment never arrives. Because moments don't create people. People create moments. And the person you are right now has been trained to wait, not to act. You've trained yourself to escape. Escape discomfort. Escape silence. Escape effort. Escape responsibility. Every time things get heavy, you reach for something that numbs you. Your phone, your entertainment, your fantasies, your excuses. You call it rest. But rest is something you earn after effort. What you're doing is avoidance disguised as self-care. And the worst part? You're smart enough to justify it. You know the language. You know the psychology. You know the reasons. You can explain your situation in a way that makes your inaction sound reasonable. That's what makes this dangerous. Because the most trapped people aren't the ignorant ones. They're the ones who can explain exactly why they're still stuck. You tell yourself you're not like everyone else, that you think deeper, that you feel more, that you see the world differently. Maybe that's true, but depth without discipline doesn't make you special. It makes you fragile. And fragility, when protected for too long, turns into resentment. Resentment toward life, resentment toward others, resentment toward yourself. Look closely at your frustration. It's not coming from failure. It's coming from knowing you're capable of more and refusing to demand it from yourself. That tension you feel, that's not confusion. That's the gap between who you are and who you keep avoiding becoming. Nobody is coming to close that gap for you. No mentor, no video, no book, no perfect plan. This isn't a story where someone shows up at the last second and changes everything. This is a part of the story where the character realizes they're alone and either collapses or sharpens. And most people collapse quietly. They don't fail dramatically. They just slowly shrink. They lower their standards. They soften their dreams. They call survival peace. And one day they wake up older, heavier, more bitter, and tell themselves life just didn't work out. That's the cost of waiting. You don't need hope right now. Hope is what kept you passive. What you need is confrontation. You versus the version of you that keeps choosing comfort because it feels safer than becoming dangerous. Because becoming dangerous would require killing parts of yourself you've been protecting for years. And that's exactly where this is going. Now we remove the lies, not the obvious ones, the comfortable ones, the ones you've been using to survive without changing. Because as long as those lies stay intact, nothing else matters. You don't need more information. You don't need more inspiration. You don't need a better mindset. You need to stop protecting the version of yourself that keeps failing quietly. Let's be clear about something most people never accept. Your life is not hard because you are unlucky. It's hard because you keep negotiating with weakness. Every time you feel resistance, you look for a way around it. Every time discipline demands something from you, you ask if it's really necessary. Every time discomfort shows up, you try to make it softer, lighter, easier. And then you wonder why nothing changes. You say you want transformation, but what you actually want is improvement without loss. You want growth without sacrifice, strength without pressure, respect without standards, results without suffering. That deal doesn't exist, and it never has. Here's the truth you keep avoiding. The old version of you is incompatible with the life you want. Not flawed, not unfinished, incompatible. And incompatible things don't get upgraded. They get removed. You keep trying to add discipline on top of chaos, purpose on top of distraction, confidence on top of avoidance. But you can't build something new on a foundation designed to escape pain. At some point, something has to be destroyed. That something is a part of you that always chooses relief over responsibility. You've been told to be patient with yourself. That advice ruined you, because patience, when misused, becomes permission to stay the same. You've been gentle with habits that deserve violence. You've been understanding toward behaviors that are sabotaging your future. You've been compassionate toward impulses that should have been cut off years ago. And you call that maturity. It wasn't. It was fear wearing a moral mask. Victim mentality doesn't always look dramatic. Most of the time, it sounds reasonable. I've been through a lot. I'm doing my best. It's not the right time. I need to heal first. I just don't have the energy. Each sentence sounds fair. Together, they form a prison. Let's dismantle this carefully. Yes, things happened to you. Yes, life was unfair. Yes, you didn't choose some of your pain. But the moment you use your past as an explanation for why you won't act, it stops being a wound and becomes a weapon you're using against yourself. And you're the one pulling the trigger. Pain does not excuse passivity. Trauma does not remove responsibility. Understanding your past does not replace the need to dominate your present. At some point, your story stops being an explanation and starts being an excuse. And excuses don't protect you. They decay you. You don't lack motivation. Motivation was never the issue. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions obey comfort. Discipline does not. That's why discipline feels cruel to the version of you that wants to stay familiar. You keep waiting to feel ready. Ready is a feeling. Discipline is a decision. And decisions don't wait for permission from emotions. They override them. Let's say this plainly. If you only act when you feel aligned, confident, inspired, or certain, you will remain exactly who you are now. Because growth requires moving while your mind is screaming for relief. It requires action when nothing feels resolved. It requires choosing pain on purpose. The old version of you hates this idea. That version believes suffering should be avoided, minimized, or justified. That version wants guarantees before effort. That version wants reassurance before risk. That version wants certainty before commitment. And that version must die. Not metaphorically, functionally. You don't kill it by thinking differently. You kill it by acting against its instincts. Every time it wants comfort, you choose discipline. Every time it wants distraction, you choose focus. Every time it wants escape, you choose confrontation. That's how identities are destroyed. Not with insight, with behavior. Understand this. Your mind will not cooperate at first. It will resist. It will negotiate. It will remind you of your limits. It will bring up every reason to delay. That's not intuition. That's withdrawal. You are removing a coping mechanism that kept you numb. Of course, it fights back. Most people stop here. They feel the resistance and assume it means something is wrong. It doesn't. It means something important is dying. And death is never comfortable. If you're still listening, this is a dividing line. On one side, the familiar self, the excuses, the patterns, the life that looks acceptable but feels empty. On the other, discipline, loneliness, pressure, a self you don't recognize yet. There is no bridge between the two, only a break, and no one is coming to push you across it. No one is coming to hold your hand while you let the old self go. No one is coming to make this feel fair. This is the price, and the price does not negotiate. In the next part, this stops being theory, because destruction without direction creates nothing. What comes next is not motivation. It's structure. It's rules. It's the beginning of rebuilding yourself on something solid. If you're still here, something already changed. Not because you feel better, but because you didn't run. That matters more than motivation ever will. Now we rebuild. Not with hope, not with emotion, with structure. Most people think discipline is something you do. That's why they fail. Discipline is not an action you turn on when you feel inspired. It's an identity you enforce whether you feel like it or not. You don't use discipline. You become disciplined. And becoming disciplined means your life stops being based on feelings. Feelings are unreliable. They rise. They fall. They lie. If your actions depend on how you feel, your life will always belong to your weakest moments. So the first rule is simple. You do not negotiate with your inner state. Tired? You act. Uncertain? You act. Unmotivated? You act. Action is no longer a response to emotion. It's a standard. The old version of you asked, "Do I feel like this today?" The new version asks, "What is required of me today?" That single shift changes everything. You don't wake up asking how to feel productive. You wake up knowing what must be done. And you do it whether it feels meaningful or not. Meaning comes later. Meaning is earned. Here's what rebuilding actually looks like. It's boring. It's repetitive. It's lonely. And that's why it works. You stop designing your days around comfort. You design them around non-negotiables. Things that happen whether you want them or not. Training, work, silence, discomfort. These are no longer optional. They are the structure that holds your identity together. Most people collapse when they're alone. You don't. You use loneliness as a forge. Because loneliness removes performance. No audience. No validation. No applause. Just you and the standard you claim to live by. This is where most people fail quietly. They can act when someone is watching. They can improve when praise is available. But alone, they soften. And softness is where discipline dies. You don't build strength in public. You build it in isolation. Early mornings when no one knows what you're doing. Late nights when no one would notice if you quit. That's where identity forms. Pressure is not your enemy. Pressure reveals who you are. If pressure breaks you, it's because your structure was weak. So you stop avoiding pressure. You seek it, not recklessly, deliberately. You put yourself in positions where excuses don't work. You create conditions where effort is required. Because when life gets harder, and it will, you won't rise to the occasion. You'll fall to the level of your preparation. Understand this. The disciplined version of you does not wait for clarity. Clarity is a reward for movement. Action first. Understanding later. That's how momentum is created. You don't need to see the whole path. You need to obey the next step, and then the next, and then the next. This is not about intensity. It's about inevitability. Your days start to look predictable. Same wake-up time, same training, same work blocks, same refusal to quit. At first, it feels restrictive. Then it feels powerful. Because predictability removes decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is where weakness sneaks in. You stop asking yourself, is this worth it? Because that question assumes comfort is a default. It's not. Effort is a default now. You don't wait to feel confident. Confidence is built by keeping promises to yourself. Small ones, daily ones. Promises that no one else knows about, especially those. The more you act in alignment with discipline, the quieter your excuses become. Not because they disappear, but because they lose authority. They speak. You don't listen. This is not a transformation you announce. It's a transformation others notice later. In how you move, in how you speak, in what you tolerate, and what you don't. You don't need to be aggressive. Discipline removes the need for aggression because you're no longer trying to convince anyone. You're too busy executing. This is where the inner war shifts. It never ends, but becomes one-sided. Comfort still whispers. Fear still shows up, but they no longer decide. You do. You are not waiting anymore. You are not hoping anymore. You are not asking life for permission. You are building something that cannot be taken from you because it was forged under pressure. In the next part, we go deeper. Because discipline without direction becomes hollow. What comes next is purpose, not the emotional kind. The kind that demands sacrifice. The kind that gives suffering a target. Discipline without direction turns into endurance. And endurance without meaning eventually breaks. That's why most people don't quit at the beginning. They quit later, after months of effort, after visible progress, after doing everything right. Not because they were weak, but because they never answered one question. What is all this suffering for? Purpose is not a feeling. It's not passion. It's not excitement. It's not something you find by thinking longer. Purpose is a target, something solid enough to justify pain. Most people treat purpose like a mood. They wait to feel inspired. They wait for alignment. They wait for clarity. That's why their effort collapses the moment life gets heavy. Because without a target, suffering feels pointless. And pointless suffering breeds resentment. Here's the truth. You don't need to love your purpose. You need to respect it. Respect is what keeps you moving when motivation dies. Purpose is not about what makes you happy. It's about what makes the pain worth enduring. That's a very different question. Ask yourself this. What kind of life would make this struggle acceptable? Not easy, acceptable. What kind of future would justify the pressure you're applying now? If you don't define that, your discipline will eventually turn against you. Most people drift because they never choose a direction. They improve themselves, but for nothing. They get stronger, sharper, more capable, and still feel empty. Because capability without mission creates frustration. You don't need a perfect purpose. You need a clear one. Something narrow, something demanding, something that forces you to organize your life around it. Purpose is a filter. It tells you what to say no to. It tells you what distractions don't matter. It tells you which sacrifices are non-negotiable. Without it, everything feels equally important. And when everything is important, nothing is. This is where your standards change. You stop asking, is this enjoyable? You start asking, does this move me closer to the target? If the answer is no, it's irrelevant. Purpose simplifies life. It doesn't make it easier. It makes it cleaner. You stop chasing validation because validation doesn't advance the mission. You stop explaining yourself because explanations don't build momentum. You stop trying to be understood because understanding is not required for execution. This is also where loneliness deepens. Because once you commit to a direction, most people become noise. Not enemies. Noise. They don't see the target. They don't feel the pressure. They don't understand why you live the way you do. And they don't need to. You weren't meant to be relatable. You were meant to be effective. Purpose also forces you to confront time. Because once you choose a direction, delay becomes expensive. Procrastination stops being harmless. Every wasted day becomes visible. That awareness hurts. Good. Pain is a compass when you stop running from it. This is where excuses die. Not because you stop making them, but because they no longer align with the direction you chose. Excuses don't survive clarity. Understand this. Purpose doesn't remove doubt. It gives doubt less authority. You will still question yourself. You will still feel uncertain. You will still feel resistance. But now resistance has context. Now it has a reason. When suffering has direction, it becomes training. When effort has a target, it becomes meaningful. When discipline serves a mission, it becomes sustainable. This is the difference between people who burn out and people who harden. Burnout comes from effort without meaning. Hardening comes from effort with intention. Your purpose will demand things from you. It will demand time. It will demand focus. It will demand sacrifices you won't be praised for. And that's how you know it's real. If it feels comfortable, it's too small. You don't announce your purpose. You obey it, quietly, daily, without applause. Most people want a purpose that fits around their life. You need one that reorganizes your life. Because anything that doesn't demand change is just decoration. This is where the inner war becomes quieter, not easier, clearer. Because now when comfort speaks, you compare it to the target. And comfort loses. Every time. You are no longer asking life for meaning. You are assigning meaning to your suffering. And that puts you in control. In the final part, this comes together. Because direction without commitment still leaves room for retreat. What comes next is the final line. The point of no return. The moment where waiting is no longer an option. At some point, preparation becomes another form of delay. Thinking becomes avoidance. Planning becomes protection. Learning becomes hiding. This is that point. You already know enough. You've heard the truth. You've felt the resistance. You've seen the pattern. Anything more would be comfort, pretending to be progress. Most people never cross this line. They stay in the space between intention and action, a place where they can feel serious without becoming dangerous. They talk about change. They consume content about change. They identify with the idea of change. But they never commit, because commitment closes exits. Here's what commitment actually means. It means you stop leaving room for the old version of you to return. No fallback identity. No emotional escape hatch. No version of the future where you go back to what's familiar. Commitment is not intensity. It's permanence. It's waking up on days when everything in you wants relief and refusing it without drama. It's choosing the standard even when no one would know if you didn't. Especially then, the old version of you survived by options. If it got hard, it quit. If it got uncomfortable, it escaped. If it felt uncertain, it waited. You don't give that version options anymore. Options are where weakness hides. This is the moment you stop negotiating with yourself. No more internal debates. No more daily redecisions. No more asking, do I still want this? That question belongs to the person you are leaving behind. You replace it with one rule. This is who I am now. Not because it feels right. Not because it feels good. Because it's required. Most people fear commitment because they think it limits them. It does. That's the point. Limits create force. A river without banks becomes a swamp. A life without commitment becomes noise. Once you commit, everything simplifies. You don't argue with distractions. You don't entertain excuses. You don't explain your discipline. You don't need to. Your actions speak quietly and consistently. This is also where fear changes. Fear doesn't disappear. It just stops being in control. You act with fear present. You move forward while doubt watches from the background. That's strength. There will be days when the old self shows up uninvited. It will remind you of comfort, of ease, of how life used to be. You don't fight it. You don't debate it. You ignore it because it no longer has authority. Commitment turns discipline into reflex. You don't need willpower when behavior is automatic. That's why the goal was never motivation. The goal was inevitability. And here's the final truth. No one is coming. No one will validate this path. No one will applaud your consistency. No one will fully understand the pressure you chose. That doesn't make this lonely. It makes it purer. You are not waiting anymore. You are not hoping for a sign. You are not asking life to change. You are changing first. This is where the inner war ends. Not because the struggle disappears, but because the sides are no longer equal. Comfort still speaks. You don't listen. From this point forward, there is no before. There is only what you do next. And then again tomorrow. And again the day after. You don't need another video. You don't need another reminder. You don't need another moment of clarity. You need execution. Nobody is coming. And now, finally, that doesn't scare you. It frees you.